Assalamu alaikum. It's a beautiful Sunday morning, uh, 4th of May 2025. So, uh, last night during the evening, I was yet working on another idea to then get a fresh and new perspective about how we can understand economics, international relations, and diplomacy. Uh, of course, my previous talks and vlogs suggest that I'm taking an approach to understand how economics, political economy factors, institutional governance is linked to cultural values. Uh, so I was reading other books. For example, I have been following the works of Harvard professor Danny Roderick, Cambridge professor Hajun Chan, MIT's Janice Imoglu, Columbia's Joseph Stiglitz, and of course my dear friend, University of California Berkeley professor Bradford DeLong, who was uh, in the economic team during Clinton's uh, uh, first administration. So he has written a very interesting book. The title of the book is Slouching Towards Utopia. He has a similar book, of course. He's a great American author, a great academic, a great technocrat with a lot of practical experience of policy making, representing economic policies that are devised by American government. So, but he's also taking a similar approach, like for example, MIT economist Darren Simoglu, who is an expert on understanding and explaining capitalism, has also suggested that cultural aspects are very important to consider to define the future of economics. Same is the case with Danny Roderick, Harvard's professor. He's saying that there should be a good link between society and markets. The role needs to be redefined then to promote and establish stability uh, within the Western world, where there are challenges emerging to liberal democracy and liberal values. So, in starting towards utopia, one of the very basic approaches used by Bradford DeLong was to then promote an argument that economics should be an interdisciplinary subject. It should not derive its motivation from mathematics and physics. Economics is not something which is really be translated into Newtonian approach towards science through mathematical models, empirical economics through econometric models, but it should have a better understanding of society and a better approach, multidisciplinary approach, by understanding what kind of qualitative approaches are present in the research, especially in the domain of anthropology and sociology. There is a epistemological approach towards analyzing data, and thereby he kind of revised his definition of money, which is at the core of mainstream economics, at the core of capitalism. Of course, financial markets promote capital-intensive production activities by providing much needed financial resources through loans, through investments, through different financial instruments. Of course, even it is dollars, it is international currency, euro, that determine the stability of globalization and determine terms of trade for every country to determine level of exports and imports across the world. And similarly, and at a more basic level, currency or money represents an exchange value. In the perspective of Bradford DeLong, this exchange value should not be derived through utility or monetary understanding, but yet have a more uh, personal identification through recognition of human identifications while the exchange is happening. In other words, he said that money was invented actually not as an exchange value to buy things or represent a substitute to barter trade, but more importantly, it was created uh, because uh, in a society, people would like to exchange gifts. So there is kind of a new definition that Bradford DeLong wants to give to economics literature, contemporary economic literature, to define economics for the future. Is that this exchange value, which represents an act of exchanging gifts, is yet more important exchange value of money. And it was such a great argument. But there were two things, for example, which we prove that how a researcher understands complexity. For example, foreign economist, uh, you understand that there are 8 billion people in the world, and it is impossible that you build an efficient economy and a really efficient financial sector where there are a lot of financial instruments being introduced by the banking sector or represent stock markets through personal recognition. For example, gift is something that I know someone, I have established certain social relationship with someone, and thereby I might represent happiness or confidence or trust through exchanging gifts. But that is for a global world, or even for nation states, for in developing world as well as developed world, where populations are generally more than 50 million people. This doesn't seem like a very practical idea. Any economist would, yes, there could be local application to it, that for small local communities, the value derived through the act of gift sharing might be a more relevant and valuable exchange value of currency or money. And it could promote certain modern and noble traditional human values. And thereby economic progress could have more sociological, anthropological aspects and contexts. But yet again, coming back to, as an economist, somebody who has worked, done research on financial markets, globalization, international trade processes, national government strategies, processes of economic growth, methods of inclusive economic growth. It all is explained through monetary values. And there is a network of international currencies representing international markets. So it is really unrealistic then to say that there's one has really discovered a new way to redefine exchange value of money. But yet, for an economist, for a political scientist, for a journalist, and especially for a young professional or a student, it is really important to then understand that sometimes it is pivotal, really important, to provide a statement which then appears to be in contrast to mainstream understanding. And suddenly any expert, once after reading that statement, should follow a certain method to then respond or discuss that statement. For example, I won't say it is a blatant misconstrue of economic principles done by somebody who is such a high quality economist and a policymaker. Of course, there should be a purpose to it, that he presented this one of in his book, one of the arguments, to then obviously the right context would be to start a certain kind of a debate. Yes, as said, it's a good idea. But then representing global economy or national economy through converting exchange value of money into understanding that we have when we share gifts. So things needs to be worked out. First of all, one needs to understand how it will have a great application in international diplomacy and how media presents its case. Sometimes criticism, sometimes an approach which will contradict the principled stand for sovereignty of a nation state, for defense and economic stability of a nation state, would appear to be contested by a very basic statement or an expression, while at the same time one needs to understand the purpose. Has it been done to start a debate, to add value to the real issues that matter for a region or for a nation state, or it is done to disrupt the processes, diplomatic processes? It has been done to disturb economic stability or political stability happening in the country. So, as an academic, this is what I have been talking about, that I'm kind of a student of media. So you listen to media for hours and hours every day, and then you see the media, mainstream media that is being broadcasted through Indian channels or Pakistani channels or Western media, and then you start analyzing the contrasting arguments with a purpose to then provide an argument, an ingenuine argument that might be related to your field of interest, or that might be related to your social identity, being a Pakistani or being a Muslim. And thereby, the civilized world represents systematic approach which promotes dialogue, and media, popular media, social media is one of the best places to then get into a productive dialogue. And the participants could be young people, or could be professors, could be businessmen, could be world leaders. And thereby, this aspect needs to be kept in mind, that sometimes contrasting, contradictory arguments need to be understood through its essence. And it would only happen through brainstorming and through analyzing the other perspective. Not necessarily it represents hate, it represents hearsay, it represents propaganda, but it will represent asymmetric information or a very calculated strategy to then expect people with other point of view to contribute positively, and thereby one of the most sustainable outcomes that will determine peace in a region, determine peace in a locality, or in the world would be possible. And you don't find it being discussed anywhere. There's a sociological aspect to it, psychological aspect to it, and most importantly, the identity of the person or the institution which is promoting a certain statement or an argument. And that is why one should then need to take certain principled stands. And thereby, for me, Narendra Modi is Prime Minister of India. He is the leader of a great Indian nation. So thereby he's represented, Narendra Modi is represented through his office of premiership. And the premiership is representing more than 1 billion Indians, a proud nation. And thereby, at the least, as a researcher, what I can do is, would say, okay, I can say, Pakistan is fine with Narendra Modi because he's a leader. And the same argument should be applied to all the leaders in the world. And it is something which can be observed through United Nations diplomatic protocols, where leaders gather, they speak at a Security Council or other forums representing, these leaders are represented by democratic leaders, And within that hierarchy, they could be head of states, or they could be ministers. And the same is, there could be young youth leaders, there could be business leaders, thought leaders, leaders representing security forces, representing aspects which would determine global peace. And all these leaders, one needs to have a yet more accommodating behavior towards the statements those leaders make, and yet expecting a lot of responsible behavior from the leaders. And thereby, if you can see that, in this respect, this lesson that I got from Bradford DeLong's mention of gift, whereby it was kind of contradicting mainstream economics for not being really practical, for having exchange value of money based on gift exchange for 8 billion people, because exchange of gift depends on certain kind of a personal perspective and recognition. And thereby I started building some basic economic arguments on that, while also providing you something, a kind of a cue, a kind of a hint, to then help you or guide you to then redefine international diplomacy and redefine global politics and regional politics. And as mentioned in my discussion, it will most effectively happen through mainstream media and social media. Now, coming back to the economics of it all. Now, the idea of exchange value of money through gifts is a great one. It is saying that, you have personal recognition of everyone with whom you are exchanging gifts. And how to make it practical. So then, the first economic argument I thought about is that it represents the business strategy. I mean, if you can wonder, what is branding? Branding provides, through advertisement and through marketing, provides a great personal perspective of the product to every buyer. And therefore, as represented by, even labor can enjoy a bottle of Coca-Cola or Pepsi or local brand. There are Pakistani brand, Sufi Cola. So these kind of brands provide a personal perspective of product to the consumer, and people associate with happiness and do consider it as a gift while paying a low price because of economies of scale. Through automation, then the factories could produce millions of Coca-Cola bottles every day, and thereby prices are stable for such consumer goods. So of course, on branding, if you start understanding the impact of branding, branding represents the strategy of every multi-billion-dollar multinational. Branding represents what kind of production preferences an entrepreneur has taken, while at the same time, branding would allow you to understand aesthetic value of the product, its technological transformation, and artistic understanding of the design of the product. For example, Apple mobile phones. Again, if you buy an Apple mobile phone, you will feel as if you are getting a gift, despite its high price, because it is because of product distinction, marketing and branding based on high quality of service. And of course, smartphone is kind of a new technological invention since the decade. So yes, gifts can be exchange value of money, could have a great connection to understanding business processes and understanding frameworks that are represented through business studies. And yet there was another argument that I wanted to bring to the debate, and I wrote a brief textbook with having a great discussion with Chat GPT, which was specifically tailored by Bradford DeLong to represent Bradford Bot, and it was a great discussion. So I gave another dimension to this debate by saying that, okay, what about health being an exchange value of money? The world is represented even since thousands of years through acts of responsibility, through acts of compassion, kindness, while at the same time the service is being delivered, which could be translated as meaningful help, and thereby putting help as a mediator between noble human values and material values that are represented through currency notes. One could really understand that this philosophy of help by default means that the society is building system analysis, because for providing help as for a large population groups, one by default has to use a systematic approach. And of course, within Islamic values, there is hadith of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that you just help people while helping it from the right hand, and your left hand should not even know that. So there is kind of anonymity, there is kind of a generalization, and there is kind of a systematic approach which represents the working of help. And so help, of course, help also represents that it is constructed through intentions to help a large number of group of people, and thereby help can be translated through business acumen. That okay, I'm somebody who's a professor who would spend decades working on new technologies, and then I would help and assist businesses in Pakistan to then really climb the technological ladder and represent industries which are value-added industries in technology sector, and thereby Pakistan becomes an export-oriented country. And what is this? This is kind of an intellectual help. IMF and World Bank, what they are doing? They are giving financial assistance. Again, one of the most intellectually informed transformations of the world health. Health represents philanthropy as well. But then, if you cannot help with gift, then how and help can be translated into a gift? Because help is something that represents some kind of a power. Whereas kindness means that, when you're kind, there's some kind of equality. Even if you are a billionaire and be kind to a poor person, or if you are a poor person and be kind to a billionaire by smiling at him, by being cooperative with him, this is some kind of exchange of gifts. And what is happening is, in most cases when money is being exchanged, it would be representing help with some kind of a power identification. So if you connect help with gift, suddenly you will start understanding the whole development psychology, the whole concept to define financial markets, to redefine capitalist economic structures that are understood to be exploitative, would then be really arguments, systematic approaches, methods of institutional governance, which would be really representing something not through an impression of mechanical values, but it would be represented through noble human values like kindness, compassion, trust, ethics, and thereby the whole framework of business competitiveness, achieving business competitiveness, would change around, and it would, with using new systematic approaches to define business process, one can transform businesses into places who would not only be working on capital productivity but labor productivity, whereby incomes of labor class, salaries of labor class would improve, while the lifestyle quality of the life of labor class would improve as well. I mean, this is kind of an amazing connection to then link help with gifts and gifts with exchange value of money, and it would redefine everything we really understand about capitalism, in a sense that it is that entrepreneur and his incentive to use wealth, generate wealth, would sometimes lead to unethical practices that might represent greed rather than noble human values and um, economic efficiencies and systematic equilibriums. Instead, it might represent disequilibrium. It might represent outcomes which might lead to financial crisis, which might lead to recession, as it is being represented in 2008 financial recession. And there was a detailed talk of 2008 financial recession in Bradford DeLong's book, Slouching Towards Utopia. And now you can understand with those so simple arguments. Now I am strengthening my work as well through these great economists, the works of these great economists, while adding value to it through my own arguments, while doing it most recently and most of the times by working with AI language models, Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, and this time around, this specific service that was developed by Bradford DeLong. And I encourage you to subscribe to Bradford DeLong's blog and also use his, if you are an economist or social scientist, you should use his Bradford bot as well, which is kind of an extension to ChatGPT, but would really be focusing on economics and especially heterodox economics and what might be the future of economics with perspective of capitalism. Now, this is kind of I wanted to share that, imagine this that the mention of gift has not only enabled me to not just criticize somebody I knew is a great economist. I know that Bradford DeLong is one of the best economists. Somebody who I know a little bit personally. Somebody I'm following his works, his readings, his blogs for many years, more than a decade now. While once reading that could appear to be so simplistic, but then since I recognized him, I had more patience, I had more understanding to then say that this is a word that needs some time of thinking, some serious thinking, to then understand the value of the debate and then add value to it myself. And thereby, so with such a simple argument, I could understand that, sometimes a contrasting news or discussion happens in mainstream media or social media, representing the point of view of the other party, that in that case it might be India, and suddenly you feel challenged. You feel as if you are being challenged, as your basic values are being questioned. It could even represent Islamic values. But what kind of a reaction there needs to be if you understand that India is also a country represented through great people, great authors, and of course Pakistan and India being part of the same region, more or less the same cultural values, would then should give us more patience. And that is similar to what I should ask Indian media or Indian leaders to do as well. That there should be a constructive dialogue. It should represent that what the common people know and what they don't know. It should represent an expert debate. It should represent construct of social common sense, and especially it should represent an effective reach out to the youth through social media presentations or mainstream media broadcasts. Now, international diplomacy, if you use such an approach, you will understand that it's not very difficult to then address regional conflicts. It is not. It should be, and in economics, instead of conflict, competition is being promoted, which improves the standards and efficiencies of the economies, of international governance practices across the region. And secondly, it would then redefine and I could add value to the perspective presented by such a learned economist like Bradford DeLong and his other associates, other professors like Danny Roderick, S.M. Group, Joseph Stiglitz, by saying that yes, if I could add help, the word help, and its identification, social economic identification, to then really understand how help and gift could work together as expressions representing social values, to then redefine economics more effectively And indeed, it, it seems to be, and agreed by Chat GPT as well, the AI logarithm, that yes, it was kind of a very meaningful debate to even then redefine monetary policy, which represents debt as a burden. Instead, it should be based on the value, where you have a sincere purpose at IMF and World Bank to extend loans to developing countries like Pakistan, representing transformations of assistance and help into gift exchange that represents friendship, sincerity, and that needs these values needs to then be integral part of the economic system and systems that represent international governance through international financial institutions like World Bank and IMF. And similarly, at United Nations, diplomacy should represent the same strategy, where contrasting arguments need to be understood, and then an expert analysis needs to be provided based on knowledge frameworks, based on unbiased analysis, based on representing respect to every leader of the nation, irrespective of being Prime Minister of India or Prime Minister of Pakistan. And similarly, this framework could add value to something which I was also writing about, that